It is 2:01. I just started recording.
Hey, Sean.
Okay. I've got to fix my screens here because I've got four windows open here. So I just want to make sure that I can advance my slide. All righty, perfect. Okay. So before we get started, like I mentioned, if we can log in to Poll Everywhere, that would be fantastic. I'll go over some of our housekeeping rules. I would really love it if you guys can turn your cameras on if possible. It just helps me to make sure that I see the feedback, that people are understanding what I'm talking about. It is an active participation class or course. So if when the poll questions come up, if everybody could participate, that'd be fantastic. It makes it more fun for both of us. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. If you don't understand something I'm saying, by all means, Eileen's going to be monitoring the chat for me so that, you know, if something comes up in the middle of a slide, feel free to just, Eileen, just jump in and say, hey, we have a question, because I want to make sure I'm answering questions that are relevant to what topic we're talking about at the moment. So you don't need to hold all questions to the end. I do also ask that everyone mute until we have open discussion time, which is typically towards the end, just because it makes it distracting for other people if what I'm talking about gets drowned out. And then, of course, number 5, have fun. This is meant to be interactive. It is also meant to be informative. This particular training is something that's super important for me to be giving to everyone. It's a mission of mine to help educate people on how to stay safe when they're navigating online. I firmly believe that this information will not only help you be safer in your personal life, but directly affect the cybersecurity of the organizations that you're working with. So with that, we will start with a brief introduction. If you were at my last session last month, you're going to get a repeat, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows who I am and where I come from and a little bit about me. I think it's fun and kind of engaging when you know a little background about the person that you're speaking with. So my name is Antoinette King. I founded a company called Credo Cyber Consulting with the mission to bridge the gap between physical and cybersecurity for all organizations and individuals of all sizes. I have spent 17 years of my career in integration of physical security systems before I started getting involved into cybersecurity. The picture of me on the Statue of Liberty was actually when I was an integrator. I was an installer technician. So I used to pull cable and mount cameras and build systems all over the country. And that was a project I worked on at the Statue of Liberty, where we were installing wireless equipment back in the early 2000s from Liberty Island back to Battery Park. So that's one of my favorite pictures of that part of my career, because at the time in the early 2000s, the torch had been closed to the public for probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 years. So it was a very rare opportunity for me to be up there. It was a beautiful view. I've been married for 22 years, happily most of the time. I'm sure anyone who's married can relate. My husband and I have been together since high school. We grew up on Long Island and moved up to Orange County when he became a New York State trooper, when he was right after he graduated the academy. We've been up here for about almost 23 years. So we have 2 kids. They're in the far right, Tyler and Dylan. My oldest, Tyler, is the one without the cowboy hat. He goes to Fordham for actually computer science with a minor in cybersecurity. He's with the Air Force ROTC. So hopefully he's actually planning on joining Space Force after he graduates. Just super cool. I want to be him when I grow up. I got my master's degree a couple of years ago in cyber policy and risk analysis through Utica College, which is way harder as an adult than it was when I was in my 20s, but I did it and I graduated with a 4.0. So I'm really excited about that and proud of that. Being involved in cybersecurity once I started my training actually started really reigniting my passion for security in general. I started seeing things from a national security perspective and the global threat landscape that I couldn't unsee which really drove me to want to do training like this. And then of course we have our little fur baby. His name is Avery, and he is very spoiled. He is our third son. So a little bit about my company, Credo Cyber Consulting. I specialize in helping organizations with governance and compliance, things like SOC 2 audits or ISO 27001 audits, data privacy audits. I do a lot of cybersecurity training for corporate environment, for law enforcement, and also for K through 12, which the K through 12 arena is really where I'd like to focus most of my time, because I think kids are definitely the most important people that we need to be educating about this stuff. I also help to write policies and procedures for organizations as it relates to their cybersecurity compliance needs. I do a lot of public speaking engagements. I'll be in Atlanta actually next week doing 2 speaking sessions and a training seminar for the physical security industry. And of course, as I mentioned, the K through 12 cyber hygiene advocacy is something that's super important for me. I actually have a book coming out in October called The Digital Citizen's Guide to Cybersecurity. And the target audience is K through 12, all the way up to someone that's 100 years old. And I wrote the book with the intent of it being relatable, with a lot of anecdotal fun stories, but I piloted the project with a couple of my nieces and nephews and my kids, and they all thought it was fun. And so I'm hoping that by introducing some of these concepts to younger children, not only will it help them be safe online, but it'll also help them be better employees down the line, when they get into the workforce. So what are we going to be working on today? We're going to be talking about what digital DNA is, the types of data points that are collected, the impacts of social sharing, what exactly we mean by cyber hygiene. And also I wanted to provide you with a daily cyber hygiene checklist. It is not all encompassing, but there's 5 things that you can do every day to kind of be safer online. And then also following that are 5 tools that I suggest that people utilize in their private lives, but also their professional lives as well, that will help their devices stay safer. So before we get started, I wanted to make sure that we kind of understood what everybody was doing. So my first question is, what is your role at your organization? So we've got board member, reference librarian, program coordinator, adult services, technical services. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds just to see if anybody else wants to chime in. Adult services, perfect. All right. Great. So everybody, for the most part, has access to some sort of technology within the library system. And then I'm sure everyone has access to technology in their personal lives. Often we've got people, working remotely. And so sometimes those things cross over. And I think just keeping that in mind as we go through the training. Also, I didn't add this in the beginning, but I have a couple of fun videos to kind of break up me talking. So we'll go into the next slide, which is going to be a fun video. We had these in our last training. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. I just want to make sure, can you guys hear it? Just want, yep, share sound. That's why I need to make sure that's checked.
Time for a few tips and reminders for your mobile devices. If you're allowed to use your smartphones and tablets with work systems, make sure you know and follow your company IT guidelines or BYOD policy. That's bring your own device, remember? Of course, you should always set a secure device password, PIN, or passphrase and take full advantage of your phone's biometric features. The face and fingerprint stuff. And do some spring cleaning every once in a while. Get rid of those apps, notes, and pictures you no longer need. Like that picture you took of that part you needed from the hardware store? Yeah, it's probably still on your phone. And finally, remember to keep your phone up to date. If your phone is over 4 years old, you might want to think about getting a new one. 4 years is a really long time in phone years. I'm Sarah Roberts, and that's your CSCN tip of the day.
All righty. So, and keeping your phone up to date is something that's really important. We're going to have a little exercise at the end so that we can kind of work through what that looks like and making sure that you have your phone updated. So we'll kind of talk about that. But first, I wanted to start talking about digital DNA. What is digital DNA? It's also known as your digital footprint. In more recent times, within the last year or so, another term has come out called digital exhaust. And that's a little bit more, digital exhaust is a little bit more involved, but along the same line, digital DNA is kind of all of the information that's out there online about you. And it's typically consumer data, but it also can be relative to the work that you do, depending on where you post your content. For example, LinkedIn is a really good source of all sorts of professional information about people. So just think of it as data points about you that are online. Some of it is created by you and some of it is created by others, believe it or not. Collectively though, this information tells a story about you. And that story could be utilized to target you online or in the real world, right? And I think that sometimes we don't realize, how much information is out there about us and what this information means in terms of how we're targeted. In connecting it back to the library systems, if you're on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on Instagram and you're sharing a story about you working at the library, for example, a bad actor might utilize that information about you and then learn what library that you're working for. They could target you for ransomware. They could target you, for worse things. Knowing what library you're working at, now they know where they can find you, right? So just being mindful of the information that you post on social media is really important because it has impact not only on your personal life, but it also could have an impact on your private life. So what is the landscape of digital DNA? Well, we've got personal information and private information, which I'll talk a little bit about that. We've got social media accounts and then digital citizen and netizen, right? So the digital citizenship is really about the various different places that we engage outside of social media. Maybe in forums, you might be involved in various different global organizations. You might have a blog, you might have a website. In the case of the library, there might be some programs that you're working on that are, online or provide services that are online. So really the landscape is this global environment of data. When we talk about personal information versus private information, I think it's really important that we make the distinguishing discernment of what that is. So private data is data that's unique to you as the individual. It is something that can't be utilized for someone else. So for example, traditional social security number, your driver's ID, things that are unique to you. Personal information are things about you that other people could share, like your likes and dislikes, where the town that you live in. That's personal information. It's not unique to you, but it collectively, again, tells a story. Personal information, in my opinion, is just as vulnerable and exploitable as private information, because when you take all of this information, you create the story about someone, you can have influence in them. You can get an idea of who they are as a person just by the stuff that's out there in the ether on the internet, right? And that could be dangerous when it comes to mis and disinformation. So just recognizing what information is available publicly about you, and then how that information can be gathered. And we'll go over some of those risks as well. So the risk is data monetization. Your information is collected, it's scraped off of all these different places, and I'll go through some of those places later on. And then it's monetized. You've got data brokers that are collecting information about people, putting it together in a pretty package, wrapping a bow around it, and then selling it. Why are they selling your data? Well, for advertising purposes. Organizations want to target their advertising to people that they think will buy their products or services. So they buy lists of people and they get these profiles about them, and then they use them to target for advertising. It's annoying, but it is benign, right? But then we talk about things like exploitation and identity theft, where those risks are much higher, because now we're talking about the possibility of ransomware, the possibility of, bad actors grooming young people, for example, for exploitation. And then, of course, identity theft. The more information that's about you online, the easier it is for someone to assume your identity. This happened actually very recently to a colleague of mine, through something that she had signed up for. It was a magazine, a trade industry magazine, and somehow her signing up for that, there was a breach of her information. They were then able to exploit a bunch of other accounts because she reused the password with that account on a bunch of other accounts, and it was really traumatic for her. Her social security number was compromised, her retirement pension system was compromised, and it's been taking her months and months and months, because now she has to prove that she is the real person, and that is really difficult. So just understanding how all of the various different ways in which people can gain access to your information and then use that to further access other accounts. And then what are some of the threats? Ransomware, email compromise, denial of service, also identity theft is a threat, I think, as well as a risk. So ransomware, if you're not familiar, is where a bad actor gains access to a system, takes all, exfiltrates the data, encrypts it, and then requires the organization to pay a ransom in order to get the information back with the decryption key. That is, in my opinion, one of the biggest threats to library systems is the ransomware environment. So although there is some sensitive information that the libraries do hold about about people, some PII, the most valuable part of the data is the services that the library provides, right? So denial of service and ransomware, to me, would be the biggest threats to your environments, because that's where the bad actors are going to be able to have the most impact. Email compromise is when someone assumes an email alias, is able to get into an email system, for example, through hacking credentials, and then taking over the emails and sending out emails to the organization's contact lists with surreptitious links that may require people to click on some, or ask people to click on something or download an attachment, and then spread malware or ransomware into other people's systems. Also, email compromise can be an environment where someone sends, for example, billing information or requesting payment, and you click on a link to make a payment, and it actually goes to someone else's, the bad actor's bank account. So that is also a threat. And then denial of service is a situation where public-facing services are blocked through various different methods. So your websites can be, they can perform denial of services on websites or any other publicly facing online services. So in that case, it is a matter of just taking the time to have to figure out how that was done and then bringing the systems back online. Why should you care? I get this question a lot from a lot of individuals. We've been so desensitized now with the prolific use of social media and the just plethora of oversharing that we have going on through social media, that a lot of people are desensitized to the why of data privacy. Your privacy matters, right? And whether or not you realize, if you think that it's benign that you're taking a picture of yourself, at Twin Cone in Bloomingburg or wherever you are with your kids, and you're posting it on social media, if you think it's benign, think again, because if someone wants to create this profile about you, if someone wants to target you, these are the things they're going to be utilizing to figure out who you are, how you think, what you like, what you don't like. The adversaries are seeking to exploit citizens. Like, this is a nation state issue. And I'm not saying it to be an alarmist or to use scare tactics, but our nation state adversaries are utilizing tactics through social media to influence things like our very democracy, right? Our election systems. And they're doing it through mis and disinformation campaigns through social media. So when we create these profiles about ourselves and we put information out there about ourselves, and we've got 10 or 15 years of social media posts, it's very, very easy for individuals to figure out, what your political, political preferences are, where you stand in terms of your family status, right? So, and a lot of people put way too much information even about, their children online. So being able to create that profile about someone and then use it to influence is very, very dangerous. Your data really is worth protecting. It's something that has a long-term effect, not only on bad actors, for example, trying to exploit you, but also in terms of your employment status. I had a situation where company I worked for, we were looking to hire somebody. She sent in her resume, and this was 15 years ago. So this is when Facebook had just really started becoming popular. And she, like I said, she sent in a resume. Her credentials looked fantastic. We just did a quick search on Facebook to find out that she had very compromising photographs publicly available on her Facebook page. She definitely did not meet the standards of what the culture of our organization was, and we did not even call her for an interview. So just understanding who has access to the information about you online could have long-term impacts even on your professional life. I'm just going to stop for a second. Do we have any questions? Has anybody posed any questions in the chat? Eileen?
Sorry. No, there are no questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about data points. What kind of information is being collected? Well, we've got our personal data, which we talked about. We have our behavioral data, and this is where it starts getting a little bit like nerve-wracking. Your engagement data and your attitudinal data. So everybody knows what personal data is. I don't need to beat that point to death. But behavioral data, engagement data, and attitudinal data is where it starts getting a little bit like, okay, this is scary stuff. So behavioral data is collected via a whole bunch of different types of activities. Behavioral data could be the way that you, what time you engage online, like the types of data that you're consuming and when you're consuming it. And I'll give you an example of behavioral data. My iPhone in the morning will alert me as to which app it thinks that I am going to open first when I wake up in the morning, because it collects behavioral data about me and how I engage on my phone. That's pretty scary stuff. It's this predictive intelligence. I've only had this phone for a short period of time, and it already predicts what it thinks I'm going to need to start my day. Some people might think that that's great, it's convenient, but it's also a little bit intrusive. Engagement data is stuff like, when you're on a website, how long you're viewing a particular web page. When you use your mouse, how long you're hovering over something. That's all engagement data. That information is collected through various different means on browsers, on mobile devices, and it is put together and packaged into this profile about you. Your attitudinal data, this is where it really starts getting interesting. So let's say you're online and you're searching for shoes. And you search for red shoes. If you previously were searching recently for hiking trails, and then you search for red shoes, you might start getting targeted advertising for red hiking shoes. if you were looking for places to go out to dinner or places to go for nightlife, and then you search red shoes, you might actually get shoes that are women's red heels, because it's putting together all this information about you, and it's trying to predict what type of thing you're looking for. So, and then depending on how you type the question in a search bar, actually can tell things about what your mood is, and the language that you use in a search bar. All of that information is collected and it's put together. And again, it's scraped off of the internet, sent to data brokers, and sold and packaged in order to create targeted and custom experiences for you online. So, data broker, data breach, or oversharing, common sources of private data online. So now we're going to get into a little bit of the how, right? The how this information even gets there. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. So first, we've got cookies, which are browser tracking mechanisms. Lots of information about you are stored in cookies, including your IP address, the type of system that you use. So if it's a Dell computer or an HP computer, a Lenovo, the operating system that you're using, the browser that you're using, and sometimes the browsing history from that site is stored in a cookie. So an example of when cookies are used, if you go to a website and you have the Remember Me button, that will actually store your credentials in the cookie. So when you go back to it, you don't have to log back in. I highly recommend that you do not allow cookies to be used whenever possible. And when you close your browser, you should have it set to delete all cookies, because that information over time just grows and grows and grows. And when you're using tracking cookies, if you go on a browser, if you're on a web browser and you're clicking on a web page, that page can access your cookies. And if you ever notice, you're on one web page and then you go to another web page and you keep getting the same type of advertising on each page, that's because they're accessing your cookies and they're learning about your browsing history and your browsing habits. So the way that they're targeting the advertising to you is the fact that they know what you've been looking at online. So I highly recommend that you disable cookies whenever possible. The one thing I can tell you is by disabling cookies, oftentimes websites won't work. So there is a little bit of a balancing act that you have to play with this, but by deleting all cookies when you close your browser, it does at least make it a little bit more safer for you when you're navigating online. So metadata, what is metadata? Metadata is information that is stored in cookies and other files about you. So metadata could be stored on images. And this is where we need to start talking to our kids about location data, which ties into that geolocation. But metadata can be stored on photographs, for example. It could tell you when the picture was taken, where the picture was taken, what was used to take the picture. And it's very easy to see that information. If you post the picture online, for example, you can, very easily see the information that's stored within the photo. So
Antoinette,
metadata.
David has a question. Can you see
sure.
the question?
Hang on, let me just pull up the chat. It's in the chat?
Yes.
Okay. Are there currently cross-browser cookies, or is it possible to segment some of your online activity by using multiple browsers? Okay. So I'm going to talk about some of the tools later on, but cross-browser cookies, in terms of if you were using Firefox versus if you were using Chrome, to my knowledge, I am not familiar. If you're using them both on the same computer, I'm not 100% familiar if they cross browsers. So my recommendation is, if you're using two different browsers, to have the cookies delete afterwards. I will make recommendations in terms of the type of browsers. So there are more anonymous type of browsers, like something like DuckDuckGo, or if you're using Firefox or Chrome, they have like an incognito or a privacy mode that will limit the amount of cookies, if any, that are collected about you. So, but I will make a note to do a little bit of research on the cross-browser cookies. That's a really good question. Okay. So geolocation is location settings that are added to images, files, browsing habits. If you allow location settings on your devices, then I assure you that that information is being attached to the various different things that you're doing, including your when you're browsing, it'll be put into the cookies of where you're browsing from. Again, very dangerous to do, especially when you're traveling and you're away from home. If you have geolocation on your images or whatever, and you're posting while you're away from home, it's going to give people alerts of where you are and also that you're not at your house, right? So it's important that we disable geolocation. Geolocation can be used in apps as well. And we'll go through some of these tips and tricks, but if you have geolocation to be allowed to be used by an app, and the app is still running in the background of your device, so sometimes we have the option, do you want to allow it or disallow it? And if you allow it, only allow it while in use. And that's a great option. But 99% of the time, we don't close the app on our device after we're done with it. We just hit back, which means that you've got this wheel of apps that are opened. And so if you're allowing these services, these, privacy concerning issues, if we're allowing it to be run in the app while the app is open and we're not closing the apps, then that could become an issue, right? So we want to make sure that we are cognizant of when geolocation is being used, when we're allowing it, and if we do allow it in an app, that we're shutting the apps off after we're done with them. Some apps you need geolocation, right, for like navigation and things like that. But I personally don't think that there's any reason why you need geolocation in your photographs. So like why your camera needs geolocation turned on ever. So I think it's important to make sure we disable that whenever possible. Another not so secret data store, and this one's a little bit, it strikes a nerve with a lot of people. I have a lot of debates with them, but privacy policies. Oftentimes, actually most of the time, when you go to a website or you utilize an app, you get some sort of pop-up that talks about tracking cookies. It talks about privacy policies, and typically people will just check the box so that they can move on with their day. In most cases, they don't check the actual settings and what they're agreeing to. They don't necessarily read the privacy policy that is you're agreeing to, but usually within the privacy policy, there's going to be a section that talks about how your information is being used. And usually there's some sort of language. If the organization does use your data, there'll be some sort of language about how they share it with partner or affiliate organizations. Those partner or affiliate organizations could be these data brokers that I've been mentioning, where, I share the data with someone else, they monetize the data, and then somehow I get something in return. So when we go to a website and you see that there's a privacy policy, and if you have to enter in information about yourself, it might be a really good idea to read those policies to see what they're doing and how they're using your information. So I don't know how well this is going to come across on the screen. I tried to make it as clear as possible. I blew the image up a little bit, so but it's an image that I utilize in training that I do for law enforcement, and it's how is data collected and shared? What information are you giving away about yourself unknowingly? So I'm going to go through each of these. I just want to do a quick time check. All right, so we are at 40 minutes. Okay. So you are the consumer, and this is all of the activities that you may do, not all, a handful of activities that you may do. And then this is the info that is collected by the various entities. And then here is when it is collected and sold to a data broker. And then this is what happens. They create this profile. So I'm just going to go through a couple of you. So for example, you post information publicly on your social media account. That information, if your account is public and not locked down, will be scraped by data brokers. They stick it into this database. You shop online. The online stores collect information about your shopping habits. They utilize that information. They tie it back to you as the person. Then they sell it to the data broker. The data broker, again, through all of these different things, is going to collect, and then boom, they now have this profile with sensitive information about you, behavioral information, engagement information, even, some people don't think about the price that you paid for a product. That information is then utilized, and then they kind of have an idea of market research, right? How much are people willing to pay for various products, or what your socioeconomic status is. So when you start digging into all of this stuff and what kind of minutia of the information that is out there about you, all of a sudden you start realizing that it is important to protect yourself and your own personal information. Now, think about the fact, let's just cross this back over to our professional lives. Think about the fact that oftentimes we are using the same device to do personal stuff and to do business related things. This information is being stored, these cookies are being stored on those devices, and it's stored about whatever you're navigating on your professional life and also on your personal life. So it just creates a very, very large attack vector for bad guys to kind of exploit. And so they can utilize something in your private life to exploit your business life. And so just think about that as we think about utilizing our devices ubiquitously across business and personal. So I keep talking about data broker, and it doesn't sound like this could even be legal, but it is. Data brokers aggregate information from the variety of sources that I just demonstrated, and a lot more, but that was just some common ones. They process the data to enrich it. They do analysis about you. They cleanse it of things that maybe aren't really relevant. Then they license or sell the data to other organizations. And the scary part is that a data broker typically has no direct relationship with the data subject. So this is all going on behind your back without you even realizing that it's happening. And so there are resources that are available that you can go and request your information to be removed from the data brokers. What's unfortunate is that to date, this is legal. And so especially, it's legal, especially now that GDPR, which is a data privacy standard that was created through the European Union. GDPR requires that any website or organization that engages directly with European Union citizens make their privacy policy known, and they also have to make it known that they're using tracking cookies. So people have become so, again, desensitized to this. They just click OK, or they click I agree, or they click I accept. Now, in the past, it was a little bit surreptitious. They were doing it, you weren't really aware of it. GDPR is now making them make it public and make them be transparent about it. But because we're so quick to just we want to get our work done and we want to buy whatever we want to buy and we want to engage in social media, we just click OK. You've now given them permission to do this legally. You've given them permission to take your information, package it up in a bow, and sell it to other organizations. And so now it's just become a billion-dollar business. So again, data brokers is one way that your information becomes available to organizations and bad actors online, but another way are data breaches. So a data breach is when data is stolen, exfiltrated from legitimate sources. It's when, we hear these big data, companies that are being hacked, and there's data breaches, insurance companies and, retailers. So the bad guys will get access to things such as credit card information if it was being stored. These days, the PCI DSS regulation doesn't allow organizations to store credit card information. So now it's becoming a little less of a risk, but they are able to extract your information. Sometimes it's usernames and passwords, address information, driver's license information, that kind of thing. They take that information and then they sell it on the dark web. And then that information. So for example, if a bad actor is able to exfiltrate usernames and passwords that have not been hashed or encrypted, they'll put that up on the dark web for sale. Someone will gain access to it. Now they have your email address, which is typically your username for almost every account, which is really hard, especially if your email address has been compromised. And then they'll take that password and they'll use it to try to brute force other accounts of yours. So with the expectation that the typical consumer reuses passwords across multiple sites or a variation of that password. So that, and if you're not familiar with what brute force means, that means that I am going to take information, I'm going to go and just keep entering your information, the information that I have into websites to see if I can get in under your account. And that could also mean getting into your email accounts, getting into your bank accounts, getting into your both business and private accounts, especially if you're reusing your passwords across both areas of your life. Typically, data breaches must be reported by organizations, especially if they're over a certain size or if the information has is particularly sensitive in nature. Stolen data, like I said before, could be a myriad of different data points. So it could be anything from, your shopping habits to your home address. And usually this information is utilized to target victims. And then the last type of way that information is shared is by you, the individual. So the impact of social sharing has a huge creates a huge risk for individuals. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and there are a boatload of other, social accounts that you can have, Reddit and Discord are just a couple of other ones. But the information that we've put on these platforms now for a decade or so has created just a wealth of information about us. Facebook in particular, Facebook Messenger, and now most recently direct messaging through Instagram has become a playing ground for bad actors to spread all sorts of malicious content. People's accounts are being hacked, and they're using the Facebook Messenger app to spread it to spread malicious information or malicious code to everyone in their contact list. How could that potentially impact a library system? Well, if you're utilizing or accessing your Facebook account through a library resource, or if you're accessing a library resource through your personal device and that device becomes infected, you can now spread that across both platforms. So just be really mindful about that. LinkedIn is an interesting one. Just a personal anecdotal story. I recently started looking through all of my social media accounts, because I every couple of months will kind of just go through and make sure that my accounts are set up properly, that my business account is separated from my personal account, all that kind of fun stuff. And I never typically do that with LinkedIn, because to me, in my head, I've rationalized it that it's a professional, social site, right? It's something that's used for professional reasons. I have a business LinkedIn account. I have my Antoinette King LinkedIn account. But as I started going through my LinkedIn profile, that was public. Obviously, we want our LinkedIn profiles to be public. We want businesses and companies to see us, right? I started realizing that there were things on my LinkedIn account that I wouldn't put on my Instagram account publicly. I wouldn't put on my Facebook account publicly. My entire work history is on there. My resume is on there with lots of information about me. And I had justified it all along in my head because it was a professional site, but LinkedIn is now becoming a massive source of information for bad actors to utilize. And they're using that information on LinkedIn to target organizations. So I tell you that because none of us are impervious, right? None of us are immune from this kind of sharing. So think about where you're sharing information and the rationalization that you've given yourself to share on those platforms, and then who has access to that information. I'd like to give you a quick exercise. We are running out of time, so I want to make sure that everybody has the ability to do this. But if you can take either on your cell phone or you can do it on a device, but go to this https://haveibeenpawned.com. If you go to that site, you're able to enter your email address. You can use your professional email address, you could use your personal email address, and it's going to tell you if that email address has been associated with a data breach. And if you scroll down on the site, I don't have time to do it live, but if you scroll down on that site, you'll be able to see what breaches that email address has been. Nope, it's the pawned is actually misspelled on purpose. That's actually the website. But thank you, David. I saw that. I saw your message. So you should be able to go to that link and see what data breaches your email address has been associated with. And if you'd like to do that while we are continuing, that's fine. If anybody has anything to share that they'd like to share through the chat, by all means, please go ahead and do so. All right, so we'll do our next quick.
This is CSEN News.
I'm Sarah Roberts with your CSEN Cyber Tip of the day. Here's something you can do while you're waiting on your car at the car wash. Check your settings on all your social media accounts and make sure they're set to private. Unless you're an influencer, you really don't need to let complete strangers have access to your life. I'm sure there are things you would share with your friends that you don't want the whole world to see. Also, limit the information you provide on your profile. The more info you provide, the more ammo you're giving the bad guys. I'm Sarah Roberts.
So yes, I want to make sure that everybody takes an opportunity after this course is over, or the session is over rather, to kind of go back through, look at all of your profiles on your accounts and see what kind of information that you're putting in just the profile part of it. I would absolutely limit the amount of information that you give on that. I'd also limit the ability for the social media platform to be searchable through Google. So just something. So what is cyber hygiene? Cyber hygiene is the active participation in your engagement online. It's taking control of your personal and private data by being educated on how the platforms that you engage with utilize your data, and then also making sure that when you engage on these platforms that you have those privacy settings set. And then of course, using best practices to ensure that your accounts are not easy to penetrate. So bad actors are typically going to go after soft targets, the ones that are easy, the people that are using 1, 2, 3, 4 as their passwords. If you just take a few steps to what we call in the industry, harden your target, right? Make you a little bit less easy to penetrate, then usually the bad actor is going to go on to the next target. So when I share at the end some of these tips and tricks of things that you can do, I think if you just enable those 5 things, I think it'll make your habits online will definitely be a little bit more difficult to penetrate. So I have a quick engagement question. If you have, if you're on your browser, like I said, just browse to pollev.com. If you are texting, just text to Antoinette King 686-22333. When was the last time you updated your social media account passwords? And be honest, this is a judgment-free zone. This is a no ego amigo. The purpose of this question is to make you really think about when was the last time that you actually did that? Because a lot of people will set these accounts and then never change them. Well, this is good to see. I mean, at least people are doing that, right? That's really, really important. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds, and then we will jump to in the last year. All right, good. Well, I suggest that first of all, you utilize different passwords, but I do suggest that at least once a year, changing the password for your social accounts, just to make sure that if your information was released in some sort of data breach, that that can't be used against you. So this is the fun part. This is 5 practices that I think that you should use on daily in your daily cyber hygiene checklist. There are a lot of other things that you can do, but I think if you did these 5 things, you'd definitely be in a good place. So first and foremost, you should restart your phone daily. I usually do it at night when I go to bed, and the reason for that is it ensures that all of the apps that you were logged into are shut off, and it kind of reduces that what we call the attack surface on your mobile device. It makes sure that you're logged out of all of your accounts, that any accounts that were using geolocation are not running in the background, and then start fresh in the morning. Other people, like to restart their phones in the morning, but if you restart it right before you go to bed, then you should be good to go overnight, making sure that all of the apps that you were using are closed out. Be aware of your location settings. Know which apps use location information and how it's used. This is really, really important. I really urge, especially people who have children, to be cognizant of things like Snap Map, where Snapchat has this feature that kids think is super cool, that they can snap pictures and it just automatically puts where they are onto the image, and the location is on the image, and then it's also in the metadata of the image. And there's a feature within there that you can find people that are using Snapchat that are in the vicinity. Definitely rest assured, bad guys are using those tools too. So understanding what apps use location data and how it's being used is important. Making sure that your social media accounts are set to private. As that little video said, and it was a little bit of cheeky, unless you're an influencer. Some people aren't necessarily influencers, but they might need business accounts. Someone like me that's a small business owner, I need to get my business out there. Making sure that you have public accounts and private accounts, and discerning what information is shared on those accounts is really important. I'm not saying that you need to swear off social media for eternity, but you just need to be smart about the types of accounts that you have and what you're sharing on those accounts. If you do need a public account, making sure that you separate that private and personal information from your public account is important. Only navigate to websites that are secure. So check in the URL for HTTPS, or for example, now you don't even see that anymore, but there's usually a lock icon on the URL, which will let you know that that website rather is secure. So the S stands for secure, and it means that the website has certificates and that the communication from the website to your computer is secure. So if you have to enter personal information through the website, that tunnel would be secure. So making sure that you only engage with websites that you have to enter information in with the HTTPS. And then this is my favorite one, and I think to me this is one of my favorite tools to use, and I think it also makes it much more easy to have those individual passwords for each account. Using a password vault will help you to create and store unique passwords for every one of your accounts. Unfortunately, most websites that we go to, they require you to use your email address as your credential rather, and then a password. So if your email address is out there, it is public information. You're using it all the time, so people have access to it. That's 50% of your credential. And the other one that I'm going to kind of lump into this is multi-factor authentication. It's also on the tools list, but making sure that you enable multi-factor authentication whenever possible is definitely important. So some of the tech tools, and I know we're a couple minutes over, so I apologize. Using the password vault, 1Pass, LastPass, Dashlane, those are a couple of different options for you. Using a VPN, which is a virtual private network when you're connecting to a public Wi-Fi. If you have to connect to a public Wi-Fi, absolutely should be using a VPN. There are some really inexpensive tools, and most devices already have now VPNs built into them. But private internet access is one, goes by the acronym PIA, ExpressVPN, NordVPN, again, using a VPN that's built into your device. Private browsing. So going back to David's question earlier, we can use DuckDuckGo as a search engine within a browser. So DuckDuckGo is its own browser, but you can also use the plugin for DuckDuckGo in Chrome or Firefox or Safari. Chrome also has the incognito mode, and Firefox has the private browsing mode as well. So this will reduce the amount of cookies and data that's collected about you. Obviously, having antivirus, anti-malware installed not only on your computers, but also on your mobile devices. If you have it installed on your computer, usually if you're using like a McAfee, a Bitdefender, Norton or Nord, they will allow you to also install it on your mobile device. I highly, highly recommend that you utilize anti-malware and antivirus on your mobile device as well. And of course, as I said before, multi-factor authentication should be utilized whenever possible. If you don't know what that is, it is using a username and password and having a third form of credential. Usually people use text messages. That is the least secure way of multi-factor authentication, because text messages are plain text and it goes out in the open, so it is not encrypted. So if someone is able to gain access to your device, they'll be able to get those codes. Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, LastPass Authenticator. There's a ton of different authentication apps. Apple has their own authenticator as well. Utilizing an authentication app is far more secure. And then the most secure way is using a biometric, such as your fingerprint or your facial recognition, as the credential. The other factor will definitely, obviously, you can't necessarily use someone else's fingerprint to get into a device without them knowing about it. So multi-factor authentication and password vaults, to me, if they were the two things that you can do, and then the VPN, of course, would be the third most important thing for you to do in order to protect yourself online. I could speak for hours about all of these tools and tips and tricks, but for me, these are the top 5. If you'd like to gain access to them or have any questions about them, just reach out to me. I can send them again if you didn't get a screen grab.
This is CSEN News.
Hi, I'm Jody Anderson. And I'm Jody Anderson. And we're here to talk about multi-factor authentication, or MFA. MFA creates a layered defense, making it more difficult for bad actors to access your networks and databases. MFA combines at least 2 or more independent credentials to grant access to an account. Give us an example of what that might be, Jody. Okay, Jody. First, they would ask for something you know, like a password. Then you'd be asked for something you have in your possession, perhaps a swipe card or even your fingerprint, thus confirming your identity, Jody Anderson. MFA is a great way to protect your data infrastructure. For CSEN, I'm Jody Anderson. And I'm Jody Anderson. Have a great day.
All right, so just real quick, I'm curious, some feedback. It was a lot of information. We call that drinking from the fire hose. I'm curious if you've learned some new stuff, if you learned a lot of new stuff, if you knew a lot of this stuff, or you're never going to go online again. So if you have a couple of seconds left, if you could just give me some feedback as to what you think about the information that was shared today, that would be fantastic. Learned some new information. You knew most of the information, okay? If anybody else would like to. All right, so the next session will be posted soon. You're never going online again. And the next session for this, it's each group is 2 sessions. It's going to be far more engaging in terms of the interactive tools that we're going to be doing. So just a little bit of a snippet was that one website, but I want to be able to kind of walk everyone through the various different settings on social media, as well as where you can look to see how your information is out there on the web. So hopefully you guys all will be able to make that other session. With that, if there are no questions, or if anybody does have a question, I will hang out. If you can't stay, please, by all means, I know we went a few minutes over, but I will stop sharing and hang out. If anybody wants to chat about any of the tools or things that we talked about, I will be here. All right, and I'm going to stop recording as well.
Doesn't look